Guest tonight is Laurie Neverman. Her website is called Common Sense Homesteading. She lives in rural northeast Wisconsin, an environmentally friendly, energy efficient, accessible, newfangled, old-fashioned home with solar panels, a root cellar, and a herbal garden. She's a wife, a mother with a background in engineering and a passion for natural healing, homesteading, and gardening. Her book is called Common Sense Health. Again, her website is commonsensehome.com. So let's go ahead and bring Laurie on. Laurie, good evening. Welcome to AM 630 and the Fringe Radio Show.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Well, good evening, and thank you for giving up some time tonight to be with us.
We're glad you're here.
It's a little bit funny thinking about common sense being fringe, but I guess in today's society, it is.
Well, so true, huh? That's sad,
is, Laurie,
but it's
and,
true.
You know, I think Fringe kind of got its, just to digress a little bit, we've invited a lot of different, we bring on professors from different universities to talk about space travel and aviation experts. And some people get a little bit, I don't know if you want to call it insulted, but they say, well, Fringe, that sounds like a crazy television program. But I kind of define Fringe as something a little bit on the edge and something a little bit different and something that the average person, not that they can't do it, but probably doesn't do it or doesn't know about it. And the whole prepping thing, to me, I find so interesting. But again, so extreme. So much of it's just so extreme. And when I went through your website and looked through all your stuff, I thought this is kind of the perfect fit because this is truly common sense stuff. Here in Utah, we've talked about this so many times. We've got a horrific fault line. I mean, they talk about all these earthquakes. What's happening? We haven't felt anything of significance here. But when we look at geological stuff in that here, I mean, they talk about in the Salt Lake Valley the potential of liquefaction, where homes can literally be sucked under the ground or destroyed, or again the power grid system going out, and everything that you kind of do is, I think, it's things that people need to know about, and that's why I asked you to come on. We asked you to come on the program and kind of talk about all these different things and learn about what you do. And I guess for me to back up a little bit and say, why don't you, if you wouldn't mind, if you would give our listeners kind of the backstory, what got you into everything you do and writing the book and this great website and living your life this way?
Well, I was raised on a small dairy farm in northwest Wisconsin, so we had a large garden. Of course, we had the cows, and so we had fresh milk, and just doing as much as we could ourselves was a way of living. So I'm the youngest out of 6 kids, and there was always canning, preserving, freezing. We raised big flocks of poultry for the meat, and it was just an everyday thing, and I never really gave it much thought. It's just you provide for yourself as much as you can. We didn't have a lot of money, but we never went hungry, and we always had clothes and shelter. So then when I went off to college, I got my degree in, I got my first degree in math with a minor in physics, and then I went on to my graduate degree in mechanical engineering with an emphasis in renewable technology. So then, after that, I used to work at the world's largest solar energy plant, that is, flat plate solar collector plant. So we put out over 1 million gallons of hot water every year. So it was kind of a progression from small homestead to large-scale renewable energy, and now I've kind of gone back to the small homestead.
Gotcha.
So it was, a little bit of a circular progression. And we moved out here in the country about 8 years ago, and we had been in the suburbs, and, that was nice, convenient. But then as our boys were getting a little bit bigger, we decided we just wanted to raise them in a very natural environment and have them take more part in growing their own food. And then, of course, the house was just a natural outgrowth of my background in renewable energy and energy efficiency and that green living aspect.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, with the, now, if we could talk on a whole, if we kind of go all over the place tonight, solar power, solar energy, I remember years ago seeing some early solar conversions, actually out here in Utah, and I had an opportunity with my previous employer to move down to Phoenix, and you'd see these big, huge solar panel arrays on tops of homes, and you could tell that within a matter of years they deteriorated. They were all full of water, and
yeah, the early systems were some sort of serious ugly. It's true.
oh yeah, yeah, and it was kind of like, man, what are they? Are they heating? What's the whole concept? Are they heating water through the? The water was, you could tell it was just full of mold and mildew and stuff. But now solar power, solar panels are getting inexpensive. I mean, you can go over to like here in Salt Lake City, we have these Harbor Freight stores. I believe they're all over the country, and they sell solar panels. Here. Yeah, and they're pretty inexpensive. Is the solar power? I mean, to convert to solar, is the technology cost at a point where it's really worth it for people to consider to give it a consideration?
Well, it really depends. It's not ever going to be cheap as an initial investment. The systems and the panels have improved a lot over the last few decades, but you still need a certain amount of raw materials to make a collector, whether it's solar thermal, solar hot water, or solar electric. And there is a fair amount of cost involved in the installation. If you're a capable plumber or electrician, you can probably do a lot of the work yourself. But odds are most people are going to have to hire a crew, and that is a large amount of the cost too. So it's never going to be cheap. I think for the average person, your best return on investment is going to be looking at any type of energy efficiency that you can implement in your home. And then once you have your load reduced, then you look at solar or other alternatives to cover the remaining load, and that's your best bang for your buck.
Gotcha. Now, the solar panel, like I was looking at on your website, you have a picture of your home, and you've got some pretty large collectors that are out in the yard. Is your whole house solar powered, Laurie, or just is it how is it used where you live?
They look pretty bright and shiny in the photos, don't they?
They do.
Those two panels are actually solar hot water panels, and they preheat water for our hot water domestic use and for our space heating. We've got kind of an unusual hybrid system rigged up in the basement where the water is preheated by the solar, and then it feeds into a boiler system, and then that boiler system pulls off heat for the in-floor heating and also provides heat directly to domestic hot water. So those are two 4-by-8-foot collectors. They're basically like the size of 2 sheets of plywood. And they probably cover, I think, between the... I don't have any metering on them because that actually impairs system efficiency. But I think with the active solar, that is those water heating panels, the passive solar, we have large south-facing windows with a properly sized overhang to allow in winter sun. And then we also have a masonry stove, which is a high thermal mass stove in the basement. Between those 3 different types of renewable energy, they probably cover about half of our heating load in hot water.
Really? So now, how does it I don't mean to say, I really want to learn about this, and I think some of our listeners would too. The panels, do the panels produce energy to heat the water? How is the solar energy transferred into? How does that become hot water?
Now, those panels are what is referred to as a solar thermal panel, not a solar electric panel. Most people are familiar with solar electric, otherwise known as photovoltaic. Those are solar thermal. There is an antifreeze solution that circulates from inside the house in a heat exchanger that's in a tank that comes out to the panels. The antifreeze solution circulates through the panels and then returns to the home and dumps its heat into the storage tank, which is an 80-gallon tank inside the house. So it is actually hooked up with an AC pump that is plugged into the grid. It's not completely self-contained because we found that with our freezing temperatures, the PV pumps could not move the slushy antifreeze in the winter, so it really negatively impacted system performance. So there's a controller that checks the temperature on the panels, and when there's a big enough temperature jump between the panels and the storage tank. It kicks the pump on, circulates the fluid, and then the fluid dumps the heat into the storage tank. And then when it gets so that it's not going to gain heat, it shuts the pump back off again.
Gotcha. And that panel, or those panels out there, they can, as you said, they provide hot water. Can they service, let's say, a 24-hour? I mean, a standard living day, if you will. I mean, do they provide enough volume for heating the entire day and hot
water? It really
water
depends upon the load per day.
Okay.
You can optimize the efficiency of your panels by pairing your load with the times that you have the greatest amount of sun. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, I do try to schedule like my laundry, our showers, for midday, if at all possible, because that's when you're getting the most sun. Now, in the middle of winter, say, or even probably November is the month that we tend to get the least solar insolation in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. We'll go for weeks where there's barely any sun. Obviously, at that point, it's just not going to do a whole lot. So during much of the summer, yes, it'll carry our hot water load. During the winter, on good days, absolutely. On no sun days, we're skunked.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, what do you do when the solar when the sun's not out, and that system basically is not usable? What do you go to then? Do you go to propane, natural gas?
We have propane. Yeah, because we're out in the country, we don't have access to natural gas here, and propane was the next most affordable solution.
Yeah. Right. Gotcha. Yeah, it's so you need to take advantage of the sun, but like you said, you better have the backup just in case.
Well, you can size your system to accommodate all your load through summer and winter, but to do that, your costs jump very much. So it just, looking at the numbers, it just makes more sense to balance it out this way.
Yeah.
Right. Now, do you use other solar for electric for lighting at all? Do you use that type of solar power at all, Laurie?
No, we don't actually have solar electric at this time. We have looked at the panels, but we were stuck in kind of a tough situation. Well, we have been stuck in a tough situation for the last 5 years. We moved out here, and we built our dream home, and then my husband lost his job.
Oh, sorry.
And he ended up working odd jobs and consulting for about a year, and then when he did get a new full-time position, he was about 2 hours away. So for the last 5 years, we've been stuck not knowing if we were going to have to move or if we should invest or how we should move forward. We've kind of been living in limbo. Yeah. But, fingers crossed, I'm hoping that within the next 2 weeks, we should know absolutely for sure, but it looks like he'll finally be able to move home soon. But I can't share all of that right now, but something's in the works.
That would be nice, yeah. It's just, it's been like that. We went through the last 5-6 years, we went through tough times, too. I think everybody, it's crazy.
Yeah, we lost our business.
Yeah, a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And, I'm back at, luckily, thank the stars, I've been in the IT business my whole life, and
before this
had
business,
had an opportunity to get back into it again. But as a lot of people know, it's it's interesting. It's a tough go in any business or any working for any new company. I mean, it's not like the old days where you got paid a good salary, benefits, vacation. Now it's kind of like, well, yeah, you can work for us, and as long as you're billable and can make us money, we'll make you money. But when we don't have the work, we don't pay you, and it's very tough. It's a very tough go. And just looking at some of the numbers, it's not like it's a couple of people. It's over 100 million people are in the same boat,
Yeah, it's been a rough economy for a lot of years, and I don't think it's going to be improving dramatically anytime soon. So we just all need to make the best of it, unfortunately.
Exactly. Do you to go to solar electric, my understanding, the little bit that I've looked into it, is that it does require quite a bit of real estate for the panels, And the assist, if you will, I understand that a lot of times a person will still need electricity, but the panels can provide, I believe, is it up to 15% of the load? They can handle a portion of it. But it seems like the cost in the amount of real estate that they take up, Laurie, is quite a bit for not a lot giving back.
That is true to some extent, and that's why I mentioned right at the front talking about reducing your load. Mm-hmm. Because if you can really reduce your load, then you can have a system at a more affordable rate that will cover a larger portion of your needs. Yeah. But for just the average American household with a big screen TV, large computers, multiple types of electronics, things like blow dryers, toaster ovens, electric resistance dryers, electric resistance stoves, not happening. There's just no way that you could, at a reasonable cost, cover that with solar electricity.
Right.
Now, if you look at your load analysis and you do things like, for instance, switch to, like in our case, we have a propane dryer or we line dry. We have a propane stove, or we do the solar oven thing, or we get creative. We have some other cooking devices outside.
Yeah, barbecue.
And we've been slowly switching out all the lights in the house as time goes on, putting in more LEDs and other types of energy-efficient lighting. So you look and reduce your load, then solar electric becomes a lot more affordable. We actually have several different articles specifically focused on sizing an affordable solar electric system and working it with your home in the green home section of the site.
Gotcha. Again, in the website for our listeners.
Yeah, that would be commonsensehome.com / I believe green home. Right. Very simple.
Right. And you can see Laurie's house and her panels out there, and
it's a cool website. There's a lot of
it is. It is so informative. The one thing though, Laurie, that's interesting is I know a couple of years ago, kind of when these fluorescent curly Q bulbs came out. Now you can go to a Home Depot and get a pack of them for $4 or $5. I remember not too many years ago they were about $30 a piece, and I remember I went and I bought a bunch for the home, and we put them in, and the doggone electric bill actually went up. And now with the LED lighting, is that kind of what you're recommending now? If people to convert over to LED power?
Now, I really like the LED lights. One, for quality of light, because I personally do not tolerate the fluorescent lights very well. They tend to give me headaches, and I know some other people are sensitive to that too. Also, the LED, for instance, you can take like a 70-watt incandescent, and the equivalent LED will be around 14 watts. So that is a dramatic decrease, less than a third of the wattage for a similar amount of lumens. And and they don't heat up, so they're good. Our first good in terms of things like can lights. That our first LEDs we installed in the home were actually in our can lights in our office area, because our home is sealed very tightly. Wherever there were can lights, they're completely foamed in, and the original, what the heck? Oh, what kind of lights are they? They were halogens.
Halogen, yeah.
They would heat up. They were energy efficient, but they would heat up in those little cans because the cans were all spray foam, nice and tightly sealed, and they would shut off. They would trip a little breaker, and they would shut off. And so working in the office, and all of a sudden I'm sitting in the dark. Yeah. And so we switched over to the LEDs, and they were more expensive, but I have not had my lights randomly shut off on me ever since we installed the LEDs.
Well, I know some of those halogens too. Boy, they get hotter than a pistol. They produce.
It's a real fire hazard.
It is. So what you're saying is, on a lot of this stuff, you really need to take a look at things, and again, it's. I think that's the thing where a lot of people sometimes get hung up is, they look like they've got to kind of go all the way with something and, build a brand new home. And of course, these are all great things to do, but there's a lot of costs there. But on your site, people can go take a look. And even if you change a little bit here and there, it all helps and it all adds up.
that's really, I think, the best approach for most people, because most of us don't have large amounts of spare cash or spare time. So you've got to make changes effectively. It just works much better to take one small thing, attack that, complete the task, and then move on to the next thing. You eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah, that's very true. What are some other things, Laurie, that our listeners, what's some other good things as far as around the house? What are some things that you recommend that people can do as far as reducing their energy bills and stuff like that, and maybe even their water bills? What are some things that people can do that'll help out?
Well, I think being conscious of your use is really a big thing. Don't leave the water running when you're brushing your teeth. Don't take the 20-minute shower. Take the 5 or, if you must, 10-minute shower. Use only as hot a water as you need. Don't crank the heat way up. Reset your water heater to a temperature that's around maybe 120 degrees instead of 140 degrees, because that should give you more than enough hot water, and you really don't want to be taking a scalding hot shower. And all the time that people are gone during the day, and most people are gone during the day, that water's just sitting there. It still has to be heated the entire time you're gone, and that takes energy. And that's another thing, of course, simple changes, programmable thermostats. If your house is empty, you can turn your temp down. Or at night when you're asleep, you can set your temp a little bit, perhaps outside your normal comfort range, whether it be hotter or colder. It's just small changes. And like for water conservation, I always have a dishpan in my kitchen sink, because your kitchen sink is one of the most used water, where you use most water in your home. So I keep a dishpan, and then after I'm done doing my dishes, when I've got plants outside, I use non-toxic soap, and I water my outside plants with my dishwater, just like my mom always used to do. And, just small things add up.
Well, yeah, and again, these are the little things about, common sense that I think a lot of us tend to forget about. And like you said, a lot of those, I know one thing that I found is that, and you mentioned right when we started, Laurie, was like these big screen televisions. Those things consume a lot of power.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think you can almost watch the meter turn on the outside of the house when you're on.
Yeah. And it's so easy to kind of go from room to room. Or I know, like our daughter will sometimes sleep out in the living room, and she'll fall asleep on the couch, and you wake up at 5:30 and the volume's down, but the picture's on, and it kind of keeps her company sometimes, I think. But it's amazing when you look at the numbers on those flat panels, and especially some people that you go in their house and they've got 4 or 5 of them on. I mean, it's they're drawing quite a bit. Plus, getting hotter than heck too.
Oh yeah.
How did you get started with this website? Because again, I'd like to cover a lot of different subjects here tonight, but when did you just sit down and start plucking away and say, hey, let's talk about this and throw stuff out there? Because it is just you can spend literally hours on this site getting so much great information.
I was trying to think back about that, and I started back in 2009, and I was just on Blogger. I didn't have my own domain name at that point. And then I moved to this domain at the beginning of 2012, and I can't remember exactly what prompted me to do it. I know friends were talking about it, because you got to do what your friends are doing. And then I had been doing some articles for a local TV station because they had a green page that they were trying to launch on their website, which never really took off. But I've always been interested in education, and just one thing led to another, and the site grew out of that. It just seemed like something I could do at home that expanded my world a little bit outside the home, because sometimes I love my children, but the homesteading and the homeschooling, sometimes I need my grown-up time a little bit more.
Right.
Definitely.
And so it all just sort of grew out of that.
You ever, you ever want to just say, get out of the house, leave me alone?
Sometimes I do.
Sometimes you do. Yeah.
Boys, take out the garbage. Boys, go weed something.
Oh, how old are your boys?
Oh, they're getting pretty big now. They're 16 and 14. So.
But that's
Oh.
Yeah, they grow fast.
But doing what you do, I mean, doing it all together, it's that's again, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort.
Yep. Most days are really great, honestly. I mean, they're not just my kids; they're my friends.
Aww.
Sure.
But some days,
like I just want 5 minutes to myself. Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Our daughters are a friend too every now and then, but then they tend to push the borders sometimes a little bit.
Well, my son, he'll be 26 and my daughter will be 19, but still, you still have your days where you're like, I love you kids, but give me my space too.
Yep.
Yeah, Mommy needs a timeout.
Well, but now they're actually at the age where I like having them around. I had them both with me at bingo last night, and it was so nice having them both with me because I don't get that much anymore. So.
Yep. Yeah. Well, they get to that age when they want to get out of the house. One thing I'd like to talk about, we've got to take a quick commercial break here in just a few seconds, Laurie. Let you get a little something to drink, take a break for a minute. I want to talk about gardening, and then maybe in the second hour talk about preparedness and some of these other things that you do. Because again, I found this stuff so interesting. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fringe Radio Show. Our guest tonight is Laurie Neverman. Laurie, thank you so much. It's such an honor to have you here tonight.
Hey, Pat. Good to be here.
Well, it's so much cool stuff to talk about. Before we went into the break, gardening and being sustainable, self-sustainable. Give us some of your thoughts on that? So many people, I think a lot of us are not, well, I can only speak for myself, but not healthy enough, eat too much processed stuff. I was looking on your Facebook the other day, and I'm sad to say I'm kind of addicted to the diet sodas. I know the stuff that's in there is not good for you. So everyone's kind of got to start somewhere if they so decide to do that. But home gardening, I think, is probably, it's got to be fun and affordable. Looking through your site, it appears that it can be made affordable. Could you give us some of your thoughts on gardening and what people could do there?
I think the biggest thing for people who are just starting gardening is don't try to do too much at one time, because I have seen this even driving around out here in the country where neighbors will plow up a big patch of land and then they'll plant it and it'll look really good for a short time in spring, and then as the season goes on, the weeds creep in. It just sort of looks like this mangled mess of plant material, and you don't see them out there. And I don't know if much harvesting ever gets done, but generally within a year or two, the whole thing is abandoned instead of providing for their family. So if you're just getting started, start small and look at the things that your family enjoys most on your table. If you don't like beans, don't grow beans. If you love carrots, grow carrots. And just keep it really simple, and that's a good place to start from.
What do you suggest, Laurie, is a good thing for the person who wants to start a garden out? And like you said, kind of go small the first time around. Would you suggest getting seeds? Would you suggest going to, I know at least in our area here in the spring, the supermarkets and the home improvement centers, they have the plants and stuff for sale. What do you suggest?
Well, probably for the beginning gardener, some plants are best directly sown in the garden, and some are better sown as transplants. So if you're just starting out, it's probably best to start with the transplants from someone else, because you do need a little bit of a specialized setup to start your own transplants inside. And some plants would be best sown as seeds directly in the garden. So you need to do a little bit of research and find out which ones are best planted which way. And I do have a post on my site that says, when should I start my seeds? And it has a printable seed starting calendar. And that has which plants should be started inside and when you should be starting them. And it also tells which ones should be sown in the garden and when they should be sown in the garden. So it kind of covers the whole spectrum.
For this, are we a little too late as far as starting from seed in the house, or are people still okay to get going at this time of the year?
Well, it depends on the plant and on your zone. For southern gardeners, that ship has probably already sailed, but for northern gardeners like myself, I am just getting started on a lot of my seed starting inside because our winter and our spring, our winter ran long and our spring has started cold. Yeah. So I was very hesitant to start my seeds earlier because if they get too large, they don't transplant very well. They actually have a phenomenon called a transplant shock, where they get oversized and then they have a more difficult time when you move them into the garden. So I expect that our last frost date will be quite late, so I'm actually just starting a lot of my seeds right now. Typically, your window of seed starting inside starts maybe 8 weeks before your typical last frost. So, for instance, my last frost is around the last week in May, so I'm counting back, 2 months before that, and that puts us here, like late March, early April for a lot of the seedlings. And then I'll keep planting basically up until frost inside, and then once I'm clear, then I'll start planting things. Well, some crops are frost tolerant, but basically I'll kick it into high gear outside once the danger frost is passed.
Do you still have I know that Minnesota got hit again. Did you guys get hit again with snow?
Oh, yeah. It was really quite white this morning when I woke up, and unfortunately my husband drove home 2 hours last night in mixed sleet, ice on the roads, passing cars in the ditch. Yeah, not fun.
Yeah, it just seems...
It's enough of winter already, my gosh.
Oh,
exactly.
I know. It just doesn't seem like it just wants to back off in the Midwest there, and especially up in your area in Minnesota. It just keep, I mean, you guys just keep getting pounded.
Yeah, it's been one for the record books.
Yeah.
But at least I'm not, with horse and buggy, and I've got plenty in the pantry, so we're good.
That's true. That's true. So what's a good plant? What are some good plants? And like you said, if you don't like beans, don't grow beans. But what are some things that people can try that they are
maybe
pretty
that are
hard?
Easier.
That are easier and they're not going to kill. And what's good for somebody to start with that's never done this?
Well, I have it on good authority that a person with a brown thumb can kill pretty much anything.
Okay.
So maybe the best place to start would be teaming up with a gardener in your area and asking them which crops seem to do best for your area. Because I know that some crops that they are absolutely easy for me are a real struggle for some of my friends down in Louisiana because they have different weather conditions and different pests. So rather than suggesting just one-size-fits-all solution, that's what I would say. Find somebody in your area who does well, and ask them.
Yeah.
How about like soil prep and stuff for your garden in the backyard? What do you recommend if a person wants to take? And we're asking you because we're going to do that this year. We're going to take about maybe a 10 by 20 area and turn it over. Carol's looking at me funny, right? Maybe 10 by 10.
No.
But I mean, what do you suggest? What's a good way for people to prep?
You'll be
stuff?
doing the work, so you can have it as big as you want.
Whatever you want, honey, right? As long as you do it. So, well, basically, you do want to, of course, work up your soil. You should probably consider a nice soil test to see if there's anything that's significantly deficient in your soil. And just look at the soil texture too. The ideal soil is a mixed sand and clay loam, which means basically if you take a handful of dirt and it's moist and you grab that and you squeeze it, it should form a ball, but that ball should be able to easily crumble. Not too sticky, not too crumbly. You want some organic matter in there and not too much sand, not too much clay. Now, realistically, that doesn't happen too many places. So you need to look at your soil texture. I'm guessing that you have cooperative extension offices around you, and they could probably help you out with either providing a soil test or directing you to someplace local that you could get a soil test, or you can buy simple ones at the hardware store that just cover the basics.
Right.
And have you looked at your soil yet where you're planting to plant things?
No, we haven't. The one thing that we have here, it's interesting being here in Utah. Our soil is very high, and it's got a high acidic content. And there's a lot of unique things that grow here that won't grow anywhere else. Like the state tree is kind of what they call the quake and aspen.
Mm-hmm.
They're beautiful trees. The problem with them is you plant one, and if you don't mind the thing too carefully, you'll have 30 of them in about 3 years.
Yeah, we've actually got those around here. We kind of call them a weed tree.
Right, but they're cool trees, and they only grow in certain parts of the country. And my understanding is they grow in soil that is high in acidity. So, like I said, what we've got in our backyard, is just plain old dirt. A lot of rocks, of course. A lot, really rocky soil, not a lot of clay. So kind of what we're going to do, at least with our thing, is get in there with a heavy tiller and turn over what is there, and then get some either manure or peat or whatever, some good topsoil in, because I know that if the soil isn't worth a darn, the plants usually don't grow worth a darn either.
Yeah, you should generally think about feeding the soil rather than feeding the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And if your soil really is that poor and rocky, you might want to consider something like lasagna beds or compost gardening where you're building up instead of trying to dig deeper down with a heavy-duty tiller.
Gotcha.
Because that will allow you to build a healthier soil layer on top that will provide nutrients to your plant. And then eventually, once you get proper worms and microorganisms going on in there, they will naturally mine into the subsoil and break that up and convert. Healthy soil can actually convert poor soil into and make it more so it has more nutrients available to the plants.
Yeah,
it's kind of a weird phenomenon.
I've never thought of that, but that's a great idea. Because really, to go rent a tiller and stuff is like, really?
Yeah,
I don't know where we're
cool.
going to buy one. But by the time you rent one, you could almost buy one, and around here anyway. So, and to do that, to just build up the soil sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, that's what I've done in a lot of our beds. Some of them we've had to break, and other ones I've basically just smothered the growth that was there because we actually had pretty good soil to work with, but it was an abandoned pasture, so there was really dense roots of quackgrass and things. And so I had just converted some of my garden beds by laying down heavy cardboard and then piling rotten manure over the top and then planting into the rotten manure.
Really?
And after a couple of years, that breaks down, and it's just this beautiful black, rich soil.
Nothing like rotten manure.
Oh yeah. I live in farm country, so I'm blessed.
I know it definitely does it does wonders, that's for sure. But that is a good point. Instead of killing yourself trying to turn over what you got, like you say, to bring in some railroad ties or whatever to kind of contain things. And again, these are all great things that we like to hear about, Laurie, because again, there's so many people, and in the second hour, let's talk about maybe doing a little bit of more, not prepping, but just being more prepared. And same thing, if you can produce a garden that can give you, that you don't have to spend a ton of money on, and you can grow your own stuff and can it and what have you. It's a great way to stock up and have something better than something you dig out of a can or mix with water and powder and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I have over 20 different posts on the site related to gardening, from everything from information for beginners and seed starting to detailed information on specific crops like blueberries and raspberries, and that would be at Common Sense Home /gardening. So.
Okay, very good.